Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Tuesday Takes is back. We are both finally back from vacation at the same time. And obviously a lot has happened since the last iteration of Tuesday Takes. But the delay was actually fortuitous because the Falcons unexpectedly made their defensive coordinator hire the day before we were going to record the show. So ends up working out because we can talk about, of course, the Falcons' decision to hire Jeff Ulbrich as the next DC. Definitely the expected outcome. But we'll talk about it. I know people have very strong takes about it. We will get into that. Also, a little bit of end of season talk because we haven't spoken since the end of the season, so we'll get some takes on that too. But before we dive in, of course, welcome back, Tre'Shon. Hope you had a relaxing post season because we didn't actually make the real postseason. We went to the Cancun Invitational, the Falcons. So how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, they had my seat ready for me there in Cancun. But another Falcons season has come and gone. We survived. They didn't, but we survived. And I guess I'm like most people. I'm just like hanging on to my Penix hope, just hanging on to my Penix hype right now, and just trying to focus on that and focus on what they're going to do moving forward. And like you said, we've had quite a bit of action. It's really only been a couple of weeks since we've done this, but it feels like it's been months, and it feels like the NFL just is constantly moving at an insane rate.
Yeah, no, it's been a bit of a whirlwind at the end of the season, and the Falcons were kind of a little bit slow and then really fast with this whole defensive coordinator thing, and we're going to get into that. That'll be sort of the lead off, but we're going to, of course, get into some off-season talk, some end-of-season talk, too, as we get going today. Real quick, of course, want to bring you guys a word from our sponsor. As always, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in the year 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or first-time bettor, BetOnline's your ultimate game day companion. Still a lot of NFL football left. We got conference championship weekend coming up. We got the CFP championship coming up. And we got a whole lot more coming your way. So there's plenty to bet on. Obviously, March Madness is a big one too for all you basketball fans out there. But BetOnline's got it. They got the largest selections of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball to NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns, three-pointers, hat tricks, everything you could think of, BetOnline's got you covered on every game, every play, and every win. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now we'll take a quick break to bring you a word from our new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, to recap how poorly my picks went over the weekend. Hey guys, welcome back. And once again, I want to thank our new sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, for coming in. We appreciate those guys. Time to check in on, of course, my ill-fated picks from the divisional round. I saw this game going a little bit differently. I thought it would be a little more fireworks, a little less mistakes. Didn't end up working out that way, as the Ravens, of course, had the 3 turnovers that were absolutely crushing, number of drops. It kept the game kind of low scoring. The Bills never really had to throw the ball around, so that crushed our Josh Allen higher than 239.5 passing yards number. I believe he didn't even crest 150, so that was way off. Lamar Jackson was close to that 52.5 number. Unfortunately, I think they had to kind of stop running at a certain point because they got behind and were having issues. So that one did not hit either. But Derrick Henry, always knew we could trust Derrick Henry to get in the end zone. So that one did work. But hey, this was just our first attempt here on Underdog Fantasy. It's a lot of fun. We're going to keep it going through the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So definitely continue on here. If you haven't joined up yet, make sure if you sign up to use our promo code BIRDS, BIRDS, like Dirty Birds and Brews, to get access to up to a $1,000 match on your deposit and, of course, a free pick. So check that out. And if you guys aren't familiar with Underdog, it's a unique approach to fantasy sports, simple pick'em style format. Select the players you believe will outperform expectations without the complexities of traditional fantasy DFS. It's got a great user-friendly interface. I love that you can adjust the passing, rushing, numbers. I love that. I think it's great. It's fun, easy to play. You can customize it to what you want. And check it out. Yeah, make sure you use that promo code BIRDS when you sign up to get the latest promotions. Thanks again to Underdog for sponsoring today's show. All right, guys. We are back from that. Yeah, Lamar's turnovers kind of screwed me there. I was hoping for more offensive firepower, because I'm someone who always goes for the higher numbers, because who doesn't like higher numbers, right? And I got a little hose there, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, we have to go back to talking about teams that haven't sniffed the playoffs in 7 seasons now, in the Falcons. And one of the biggest dominoes, arguably the biggest domino to fall pre-free agency draft was, what are they going to do with defensive coordinator? Because they moved on from Jimmy Lake, which we talked about a little bit. But before we get to Ulbrich, what are your thoughts on the decision to move on from Lake? I mean, I think I know, but
man, yeah, good job, Raheem. I'll just go ahead and get out of the way. And I'm gonna say he took it one step further because he addressed another issue that I thought was in the building, and that was Jay Rodgers. For many that don't know, Jay Rodgers was Brandon Staley's run game coordinator and defensive line outside linebackers coach during those Chargers years. Those were some of the worst defenses in the league that year, especially against the run. They were terrible at run fits. Defensive line looked out of sorts, and that was a defensive line with Khalil Mack and Bosa. So I really want to give him credit for getting the entire issue out of the building. It sucks. I feel bad for Raheem, to a point, because it's hey man, I do think he was doing this for a friend, but I think he also thought that Lake was ready for this. This was going to be a good redemption moment for him. This was a guy that was a college head coach, a defensive play caller at that level. Not everybody's able to make that transition. He did work under Raheem when Raheem was DC. I do want to at least say that there was a little bit of validity to this hire when it happened. On the flip side, we all saw a lot of the concerns, and we're just really worried that this kind of seemed like it could be one of the biggest projects he's taking on, and that's what it turned into. And I think the hire of Ulbrich says a lot about Raheem in 2 ways. And I think once we really get into that, it's more than just it's another familiar face. And I think that he's going to bring something to the table that Lake couldn't. But good job, Raheem, and thank you for getting rid of Jay Rodgers.
You're talking about that
one
the
of those
first
things where,
Tuesday takes of the season. I'm pretty sure we were talking about Jay Rodgers. So
yeah. But hey, no. Raheem did the right thing, and he has to get credit for that. We were you can't bring Lake back. You can't bring him back, man. You can't hire your best friend and cover his shifts. That's something we've been talking about. Yeah. And he's out of here, and it was just the best move for the team.
Yeah. No, I think everyone's saying that Raheem's just hiring his buddies just to help them out, and he doesn't believe in their coaching abilities. That's just obviously not true. I get that fans think that. It's just distilling it down to something that's way too simple and just not accurate. I'm sure Raheem has tremendous respect for Jimmy Lake's coaching ability. He believed in Lake's ability to take the next step and become an NFL defensive play caller. That obviously didn't work out, but he had the same faith in another guy that he also brought in to be his coordinator, Zach Robinson, and that did work out. So it's the process itself isn't bad. I think trying to do that with 2 coordinators at the same time, probably too aggressive, probably a little too optimistic, but the process of doing that in a vacuum isn't necessarily bad. I think obviously in hindsight, it's probably shouldn't have taken on that much as a head coach, where you're going to have to possibly babysit 2 sides of the ball. And luckily it didn't seem like the offense needed a ton of help. Robinson, after a kind of shaky start, which not surprising, Robinson seemed to sort of take control of that, and then Raheem had to really invest in the defense. But Raheem seems to really want to be the CEO and not have to be involved that heavily in either side of the ball. So, I mean, I don't really blame him for that. And again, I don't think the decision, the process behind the decision was bad. Obviously, the hire itself didn't work out. and that's a negative mark. But I think people thinking that he just hired Jimmy like to like give his friend a bone, like I'm sure that's part of it, right? Like, but he also believed in his abilities. Like it's not like he was just like, well, I'm just gonna help this guy out. I think he sucks. Like, nobody's doing that. Like that's just not a thing. But it kind it's sort of like Ulbrich is like the logical extension of that, though, in that this is another person that Raheem is very close to. They have a lot of history together. The difference is Ulbrich is more established as an NFL coach and a lot more respected overall, I would say. And, to preface any like criticism of the hire, I do think Ulbrich is a good coach and a respected coach. And his players seem to love him. So that's always nice. But I think there are reasons to criticize the hire for the Falcons that I'm sure we'll get into. But like prefacing it, I don't think Ulbrich is a bad coach. Like I know some people just jump right to that, like, oh, he's not qualified or whatever. And like, part of it is like I don't know how much play calling and control he really had. We know Robert Saleh said he called the plays, but I don't really know what that means. Like, it could be that he did everything. It could be that he, like, had Robert Saleh's play sheet in his hand and just picked plays. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't really know. So I'm sure Ulbrich will address that. So maybe the criticisms that he's not experienced as a play caller, maybe that was a little too far on my part. I don't know. I'm sure he'll talk about it. We'll know more.
Yeah.
But to be fair, Saleh said he called the plays. Maybe he did. But
I think he is the most qualified, one of the more qualified coaches to do what he's going to be asked to do here. And I do think that some of the play calling history is being a little oversold. Saleh talked about like, hey, Ulbrich calls the plays, everything like that. They've never said that was exclusively like him. Like he's the only one who gets to call plays. Like Robert's the orchestrator of that scheme. They're going to talk back and forth. He's going to let Jeff ultimately have control game day, I think. And that sounds really similar to the relationship Morris had with Lake. And I think that's why this hire for Raheem makes a lot of sense, because he does not want to have to be this mega hands-on guy like you're talking about. He wants to be the CEO type. And I think that's why he was hired. However, this team has consistently talked about everything being a collaborative process. And I do think Raheem is like going to want Jeff to carry out like Raheem's vision, or they're going to collaborate on a vision that the two of them can carry out together. And that's really what I think Ulbrich did with Saleh. And I think he excelled at that. I think we saw like when they were working as a pair, like that Jets defense in 22 and 23, it was great. It's also like a defense that was loaded with talent and pass rushers that we haven't really seen here in Atlanta. So you do have to kind of look at that roster and factor that into it. Like these were good defensive coaches. These were also really good defensive players. 24 is where you see Saleh exit, and then you see the Jets defense just fall apart. And like, I'm not going to say like, oh, it fell apart because like Jeff Ulbrich was all alone now. And look, he can't do anything by himself. Like he deserves credit for like what he brought to the table in that coaching relationship. And the two of them together were clearly better than they were apart. And I don't really think that says a lot about, Jeff, because you just got elevated to being head coach midseason. Anything that happens after that, it's kind of just a wash, because you can't really point the finger at one thing. Players were probably upset, like, so on and so forth. It's just a different vibe whenever you go through that experience. But like you were saying, Raheem, for him, seeing Jeff come open, this is kind of like, like this is the guy who can have that collaborative relationship that he wanted to with Lake. And he knows that Jeff's going to be able to bring something to the table that I don't think Lake just had. Like, at least not at this level. He just wasn't able to really be that, like, lead lieutenant that Raheem needed on, like, the defensive side of the ball. And I think, man, when I think of, like, lieutenant, when I think of, like, doing things the right way, holding guys accountable, stuff like that, like, you do think of, like, Jeff Ulbrich. That's what's always been said about him as a coach. And I agree with you. As a position, I was actually really hoping he'd be back here as a positions coach. I was really hoping he'd be here as a linebackers coach. Probably going to get my that's probably what's going to happen now. He's probably going to be a linebackers coach. I made a bunch of jokes about them potentially signing a DB defensive coordinator and how we weren't going to be able to tackle. So I got what I wanted. I'm not really able to complain.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did think that was sort of an underrated thing, is that they have such an experienced like secondary staff with Jerry Gray and some other guys. They don't, and Jimmy Lake kind of felt a little bit redundant in that area. Like, how many secondary gurus do you need? Like, almost felt maybe like there was like a too many cooks in the kitchen approach there at sometimes. So I was hoping like Steve Wilkes or Jeff Ulbrich or some of these guys were very much defensive, line back. Dennis Allen, same thing, Ryan Nielsen. A lot of these guys are defensive line or linebacker coach. Like even Wink Martindale, linebacker coach, so it's like more front seven oriented defensive coordinator, because you've got Jerry Gray basically as a sort of co-DC coaching the secondary. I thought that would be good. So from that angle, I like it. And again, it's like, I don't really have much to say about the Ulbrich hire from like, I hate, like it's not really any criticism of Jeff Ulbrich himself.
Yeah.
The worry is really that, do we end up with a Lake situation where it's sort of like, it seems like there seemed to be like, I don't know if it was too familiar or like the changes didn't come soon enough, or there was some kind of weirdness there. It's hard to put your finger on exactly that was, but it's concerning. Like, nobody wants that to happen again. Now, obviously, Lake and Ulbrich are two different people. Just because Morris has a close relationship with them doesn't mean that they're going to work the exact same way or anything like that. But I think that's one of the concerns, is like maybe the familiarity, there's too much of it and we need more of an outside perspective. But, it's hard to quantify exactly how important that is or wasn't, for this year, but it certainly feels like that had some kind of an effect on the season.
Definitely. And I think, we do have to take Raheem at his word to, a certain extent. And he always talked about how like he put a lot on his coach's plate and gave them a lot of independence and stuff. With many things. Like, obviously, I think when you look at the overall larger things, such as like scheme and stuff like that, like Raheem kind of had like a specific vision, but he gave his guys a lot of freedom within that. And like what I'm kind of referencing, and one of the reasons I think Jay Rodgers is gone and stuff, and even though Raheem talked about the development and the way that the young defensive tackles are going to, enter the game and start playing on the field and the roster and everything like that, I don't think that they were connected as to how that plan was going to be rolled out. I do think the snap distribution stuff along the D-line kind of irked them a little bit, because like head coaches are not responsible for subbing. Like, they're not going down to that amount of detail. That's Jay Rodgers. That's like Jimmy Lake to an extent, but really that's kind of like what the position coaches, that's when you start to lean on them and stuff like that. And that was like a consistent theme that we talked about like almost since week one, which is like, where are half of these guys? Like, not even the rookies. Where is Zach Robinson? Why is Eddie Goldman not used on pass? Like, just all this kind of mismanagement. And we kept having this theory of like, is there an internal like talent evaluation issue or disconnect or something? And I think the removal of two coaches, especially in those two really bad areas in the front seven, shows you there was a big disconnect. I don't think there was a disconnect in the secondary, because like you said, that's where the brain power, that's like where the brain power was last year. I think there's more of a talent issue than there really was a huge disconnect issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are obviously several things, and that kind of ties into the end of season. Like, D. Alford did not have the season you were hoping for, to the point where the Falcons now have to find another slot corner. And, obviously the two big like additions before the season that everyone thought were going to be like, I don't think anyone was thinking that these were going to be like, oh, this is going to lift the Falcons to a top 10 defense. Like, but maybe like teens,
there's well,
maybe there were some that thought that, but like, Justin Simmons was okay. He was pretty much an average safety, which is not what you're paying $8 million for, but it wasn't, he wasn't a liability, but he just made so few plays back there. It was kind of obviously a disappointment. But the real kicker was Matt Judon just being a ghost. And, that was huge and cost the team a critical pick that they now won't have. And Hard to look at that as anything other than a massive mistake. But I don't blame them for making the trade, but it just didn't work at all. It's a shame. But so,
Yeah.
the defense obviously had to work from that, which is like the two big moves that you thought were going to help you didn't help you nearly as much as you thought, or not at all. But at the same time, the pieces they did have, particularly on the defensive line, they just weren't utilized. And it really called into question the entire offseason, because it's like, we're going to convert Zach Harrison to interior and then draft 2 interior guys, one of which will see the field for like 10 snaps all year. Rook, like, even when Rook was healthy, he barely played. They didn't really seem to have much of a plan. Everyone regressed defensively, like on the defensive line, except for Arnold Ebiketie.
I was gonna say. He stayed the same.
Yes, Arnold Ebiketie has continued to basically look like he could be an edge too, which is nice. But I think it was clear like there was a coaching problem when every single defensive lineman on the team had a worse year than the previous year. And I mean, it's shocking when you see someone like David Onyemata become basically ineffective over the course of one offseason. And definitely part of it's coaching. Obviously at this point they're going to have to cut bait because they desperately need the money. But part of that I think was probably not on him. And then, so Ulbrich should help in that.
That should definitely help. And I think there will be a lot of discussions about, what are the Falcons' plans schematically? What, Ulbrich hires. That means we're going back. We're gonna go back to our old scheme, or whatever, this, that, and the other. And I don't really think like scheme was a big discussion this year. I do not think scheme was as big of an issue as like we're making it out to be. I do think the issue is the talent issue on defense, plus the like what Ryan Nielsen did the year before. I feel like it was an outlier. It wasn't really like something that should have been used as like the baseline to judge that defensive team and that defensive roster, but it was as we propelled into this year. I know like you and I were both pretty adamant about the fact that the defense still had a decent amount of holes going into this season, even after those, 2 30-year-old additions. We were kind of like, well, I guess as long as everybody that's at the starting level is good, then sure, you're fine. That's not what happened. Regression, which was kind of always on the table, took place. And I don't really think Jeff signals a move to anything, because there is no Jeff Ulbrich defense.
Not that we know of, right? Yeah,
I mean, he has run what another defensive mastermind wants to run. And I think that is like a really good quality to have as a coach. I think that's important, especially if it's going to be like, a similar relationship, Salah, Ulbrich, Raheem Ulbrich. And like, that's kind of like what I was saying earlier, like Jeff has shown that he can operate in that environment, and that maybe he can he can't just run it. He can like do it as good as it possibly can be, as the top defensive coordinator of top 5 defense back-to-back years. So I do think that we're going to probably be pretty similar to what we are, but what's really going to tell us what they want to do is the players they sign. Yeah. There's tons of free agents on our own. Like, we have a bunch of pending free agents. Last year we kept most of the same defense around. I think this year is where you see like a 50% roster flip on that side of the ball, like something around that like neighborhood. And then whatever they bring in, we'll look at some of these Jets free agents that are probably going to be top targets. We'll look at some other guys. Then that'll kind of give us a little bit of a tell as to what they're thinking. But like, at the end of the day, you're going to be a nickel. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, you're going to be a nickel. And there's most players, the good ones, are scheme proof. AJ Terrell, he's a great corner in a primarily zone defense. The year before, primarily man defense, he was great. Arnold Ebiketie, 3-4, 6 sacks. 4-3, 6 sacks. like it really doesn't have that, like it's really not this thing that people like blow it out to make it into the, like it is fascinating to study schemes, and I think that's why there's been such a bigger focus on it from fans and stuff in general. But like at the end of the day, it's about the players, and you got to have legitimate NFL caliber players in the building to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, I don't. It's gonna be hard to see this team getting a serious infusion um, of talent. So they're gonna have to make it work with what they have to some extent, and that is kind of scary. But some of it they're just gonna have to figure it out. Like I think they have room, I think, to grow scheme wise and play more effectively, especially like really, I think they need to coach up the guys they have on the D line. Like we can't really afford to just go and bring in a whole new D line. Like they're probably going to have to cut bait with some of these guys. So at that point, you just have to utilize the guys you drafted. Like you drafted Rook and Dorless for this year, like for 2025, not 2024, 2025. So those guys have to be part of, like, Rook is probably, he has to be a starter more than likely, and Dorless needs to be a core rotational piece. And maybe they are ready now, like especially if we get a better defensive line coach in here, maybe they could be ready. Like I don't think Dorless looked outclassed when he played, obviously,
No.
like a rookie. And I think Rook we know was raw, but like you can see why a team would fall in love with his traits. He's huge.
Yeah.
He's huge. Like
Good contributor in the run.
Yeah. And he's a great athlete and he's huge. So like if you can just teach him to pass rush, he could be really good. Like there's nothing really physically limiting him in that regard. So but that's kind of the thing they'll have to depend on, because at this point, David Onyemata probably is going to be exiting post June 1st, bring 10.5 million in savings there. I have a hard time thinking they're going to move on from Grady. Just because it would hurt so bad, and like nobody wants Grady to leave. Like nobody does. Like Grady had a fine season, but he's making like 20 million a year. That's the only issue.
So much money.
Yeah, like Grady at like 5 to 10 is totally fine. At 20, it's like, oh my god, like that. It just is. But I still don't think they're gonna cut him. So what they'll probably do is extend him at a more reasonable number. Now that he's getting into his mid 30s, so because they can cut 11.9 million off of his cap hit this year if they get aggressive with an extension. So it's just, it'll be up to him kind of if he wants to go that route. But I find that hard to believe. But those are like two of your biggest D line pieces that maybe shown the door for cap reasons. So
it's what you're really telling me, Kevin, is that this is this is like the Terry year. Like this is like the year for Terry. Like I don't think there's ever been, like, this is going to be his biggest challenge as a GM outside of acquiring the QB. And now you have the QB, or you believe you do. We saw what happened when they believed they had it last time. That's when we ended up with Bijan and that draft class. And I think it's going to be very interesting to compare how he operates, because we do have like kind of an idea now of like, okay, he thinks he has the guy. Like, what has he done in the past? How will he look? How will we mirror that? And he's going to have to do some real cap navigating, like getting rid of the dead cap. I just feel like it's been a little bit overblown, because it's one of those things where it's like he had to make the moves he had to make, and any other GM that came in was going to make those same moves. Like there was
than Mickey Loomis,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Other than his old boss, who probably would have figured out a way to put in 50 void years on Matt Ryan's contract and Julio's and whatnot. Yeah. So this is like the year where it's like, okay, Terry's really going to have to show like his chops from the restructure, extension, like all the tricks, bust out, get the Grady Jarrett extension done, but it's really a fake extension because it's got 3 void years and all they did was move the money and disperse, whatever, however you got to do it, Terry. Terry has to figure it out. And I think that's one reason why, like me, that I'm not really moved one way or the other by this Jeff Ulbrich problem, because it's like the Falcons' biggest issue is talent. If we say their biggest issue last year was coaching and they got rid of the worst coach, then it's like, okay, then really from here it's like, now get the new guy players. Like, sure, the old guy didn't have players, but the old guy obviously like was just in his own world. Had to get him out of here. So, now you're take two. So what do you got? And like, I don't know. It's gonna be really just putting a lot of faith in Terry at this point. Which like, I've been hard on Terry. But I do think that he has like shown the ability to kind of navigate the veteran contract space very well. His Caleb McGarry contract deal is probably one of the more underrated things he's done. That's looked better as the years have gone on, and I think it bought them now, when you look at it, an extra year of right tackle play that maybe they wouldn't have had before if they had tried to do some other kind of deal, or who knows. Yeah. But it's really just kind of that time now where it's like, how good is your GM? We're really going to figure out now.
Yeah. And this is a year where we're probably going to see them go balls to the wall, right? Because last year they didn't. They had the opportunity to do it more. They chose not to, which in hindsight, probably the right call. Given how things went. Now maybe you could say like, oh, if they had really gone more balls to the wall and gotten more instant contributors and things like that. They had, like, I think we all know now, if they hadn't taken Penix, we would be back at 2021 again right now.
We'd have Rome, Odunze, and Drake London, and nothing, and Bijan, but like,
yeah. Or like we'd have Latu or Jared Verse, and that would be great, but we'd have no quarterback. So again, it's like, well, we finally got the edge rusher, but what did it cost you? Everything. Everything. Yeah. So yes, like, again, like, it's funny looking back at the Penix pick, and I think a lot of us were like, well, like, it's a quarterback, so how mad can you be about a quarterback pick? Because if the quarterback's good, it's a great pick. It doesn't really matter if the quarterback's good. And obviously it's like, well, the Kirk Cousins deal was the stupid thing. The Penix pick was great. So we've only seen 3 games. We got a long way to go there, but thank God for Mike Penix, and that's kind of the only thing they got. But the fact that they have Mike Penix, I think, makes the Kirk Cousins situation a lot more palatable, because a lot of people are looking at it the other way, where it's like, oh, you have a $40 million backup, that's unacceptable. Well, you have a $5 million starter, so I mean, you can do that. You can play whatever games you want. This isn't really a Kirk Cousins episode, but do you think they're just going to post June 1st and eat it, or are they going to hold him and try to find a suitor? Because
they're holding. I
hope so.
It's remember when Matt Ryan was unmovable because of his $40 million dead cap hit? I mean, this isn't even, I think it's funny the way this Kirk contract has been blown up, because it's not nearly as bad as everybody wants to make it out to be. Like, they spent a lot of money, like they put a lot of money, guaranteed money, on it year one. And so if, like, from here forward, this is like a palatable contract for a team like the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the insert QB needy team here, because guess what? There's a lot of QB needy teams that are going to be coming up this offseason, and there's not a lot of quarterbacks in this draft class that people are going towards and thinking are the answer. So someone's going to call, and that's kind of where it just, from there, that's where Kirk Cousins is going to have to figure out. And, maybe it's a game of chicken. Kirk, do you want to go play? Like, whoever tries to trade for him is going to try to cite him. So, like, it's going to come down to whether, like, hey, do you want to stay on this current contract that you said you were happy, like, ending your career on? Or are you trying to secure another bag and want the Falcons to cut you so that you can make more money? Who knows? Like, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, but I don't see Atlanta just getting rid of Kirk Cousins when there will likely be callers before and after the draft.
Yeah, because a lot of people assume, probably correctly, that Kirk is going to demand to be cut and refuse to greenlight a trade, because that's what he's done in the past. And his agent is known for being extremely aggressive with these things. Has a great agent. Tip your cap.
Yeah.
But the best chance for Kirk to get guaranteed money in 2026 is to stay on this contract. No one in hell is giving him any guaranteed money next year. So
There's no bag.
if he forces the Falcons to cut him, he loses $10 million next year. If he doesn't get cut or he takes a trade, he gets $10 million next year guaranteed. So it's really up to him. I mean, maybe the money doesn't matter that much to him anymore, but I kind of find that hard to believe given everything that his agent has done up to this point. But if he, people think this is very simple, and it's actually not. And I think the way they structured the contract is fascinating because they structured it in such a way that they save nothing from cutting him. And a lot of people think that's dumb. I actually think it's a very high point of leverage because the Falcons will go to his agent and say, we have no reason whatsoever to cut you other than to save $10 million next year when we're already going to be saving 20 to 30 million by cutting you. So it would be nice to save that money, but we still have to, we're probably going to end up spending that going out and getting another backup quarterback. So that's high leverage. The Falcons can be like, well, we gain nothing from cutting you. So you better play ball or we're just going to make you our backup for a year. And then you can go try your luck a year later, a year older, and probably getting 0 snaps. So it's not as cut and dry as I think people make it out to be.
It's really not. And I think you laid it out really well because it's like, hey man, you're kind of old at this point. Like there's not really many options for you anymore. And I don't know, Kevin. Well said. I just think that it's not this situation where the quarterback is holding the cards because, like you said, their biggest play is what? Not playing, which means the Falcons recoup the money because now you're just going to get fined. Like, there's no win for Kirk in this situation.
That's the best thing he could do is sit out. The Falcons start getting the money back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so I don't know. It's a fascinating situation. I think it's a lot more fascinating than sort of many people think and just kind of dismissing it outright. And a cowardly front office would just cut him because they don't want to deal with it. I hope the Falcons aren't going to do that. And it's also just hilarious to me that people are like, the Falcons have wronged Kirk Cousins somehow. They gave him 2 years guaranteed, man. What does Kirk Cousins have to be upset about?
I don't know. I don't know how you wrongs. Boy, the Falcons gave Kirk Cousins Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and probably one of the best offensive lines he's ever had. Gee whiz, they really
screwed him over. Yeah, they gave him way too many games. They gave him 5 games of no touchdowns and multiple interceptions.
We literally heard them in the presser no one was happy when we had to make the move to Kirk, and we were basically holding on for dear life until we had to. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah. So that's going to be a fascinating one. I'm sure we'll probably do a whole episode on Kirk at some point. But the short version, folks, if you just skip to the end of this whole tirade, they're not saving any money with the Kirk thing. Even if they trade him, it's kind of a wash. But the nice thing about the trade is that you get the money off the books now, as opposed to if you cut him or do something next year, you still have money getting paid out in 2026. If you execute a trade before June 1st this year, it's all gone. So that's nice. You have a clean slate in 2026, which is why it's, again, better than the Matt Ryan contract where there was no way to get out of that future money. And shout out to my discussions with the prominent NFL reporter that insisted that Matt Ryan would have difficulty being traded because he would demand a new contract. Lo and behold, he was traded. Did not sign a new contract. So,
Do you know who Matt Ryan is, man? Come on.
I was like, okay. Love you, prominent NFL reporter. Still respect you. But yeah, that's going to be a fascinating situation. But that's just one domino. It's actually not that important of a domino because it's probably going to be a pick swap. Like a 7th for a 6th thing. I would think the Falcons will swap one of their 7ths for a 6th rounder and call it and be happy with that. So they're not getting a premium pick. Now, if for some crazy reason a market develops, then all bets are off. But that would be weird. I really don't see a huge
to be
market.
Really surprised, but
but then if I think you just bet on chaos and that someone will come calling for Kirk before the season starts. And that's probably going to happen. Like something's going to happen, and someone's gonna need an option. And like Sam Darnold's getting the bag. Justin Fields, rumors are that he's going to be the Steelers starter, so he's not available. Who's backing? Like, how much trust do you have in Russell Wilson? I mean, Russell Wilson's older than Kirk. So
about as athletic as him these days too, unfortunately.
I mean, Russell Wilson definitely played better in the second half of the year. There's no question there, but like, I mean, someone coming and getting Daniel Jones, like, I mean, that's basically the free agent options. It doesn't take much to talk yourself into Kirk Cousins being a year removed now from the injury and maybe a little bit healthier, and maybe it doesn't take much for some of these front offices to talk themselves into that when the alternatives are like the third or fourth quarterback in this draft, which is not startable probably. And some of these free agent options. There's not, just like every year, there's not enough quarterbacks to go around. So It's fascinating discussion. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Looking like the free agents they bring back, that will be interesting to see. That's going to be kind of the first domino. They brought in a lot of futures guys, which, given their cap situation, not shocking at all. They basically filled up the top 51 with like 17 like futures contracts, which are all vet minimum. So now they qualify for the top 51 rule, which is great for all their future transactions. But yeah, they got a lot of work to do. They're negative, $9 million? If you factor in the draft, they're like negative 12 or 13.
Something like that, yeah.
And they've got 5 picks, 2 of which are 7th rounders. So, this is like Terry's opportunity, because if he navigates this year and puts a good team on the field, and like his strength has been contracts and veteran free agents. Trades, not so much. But the signings and the contract management have been his strong suit. So this could be where he shows like, hey, I'm not so great at these other things. I'm working on it. Hopefully those things will get better. But what you can depend on is I'm going to manage these contracts and these cap situations really well. Which is something that a lot of GMs don't do well. Dimitroff, notably, that was arguably his biggest weakness, was managing that stuff. So, obviously, you'd like the draft to be better, and it kind of has to be. But the first thing we're going to see is how they navigate this free agent situation, and I think that'll be fascinating. But
yeah,
I think Drew Dahlman has to come back, right? There's not any other viable option.
I agree. I definitely think Drew needs to come back. It sounds like those last few games are really gonna sour everybody, but like he's still like an elite run blocker. Like you could just see how much he helps Bergeron out too. I feel like Bergeron got a big boost when he came back. And like Ryan Uziel, 7 penalties. Second most, like I think it was second most or third most on the O line. Didn't even play, every game. Bergeron, and I think Matthews had 1 more than him. I think he had 8 to New Zealand's 7. So we were talking about how many drive-killing penalties there were throughout this year. I don't know if you want to bring him back, but I will say the center market looks like it is going to be competitive this offseason, and so I'm going to be really interested to see who else comes calling for Dahlman, because teams like the Chargers, the Bears, there's quite a few teams out there with money that need that want a power running, that want a center they can run the ball behind, like that want to have some like road graders. So really hoping that he comes back. Kind of hoping the whole O-line is able to come back. Crossing my fingers and Matthews isn't going to surprise retire on us at this stage. I think he wants to finish out that contract, collect those final checks. And yeah, I don't see anybody else going anywhere yet.
Yeah, the offensive line, I think you just have to keep it going. You just have to try to keep it together. I think the one guy they will prioritize is Dahlman. I think they will not let him sniff free agency, because for exactly the reasons you mentioned. They don't want him getting wind of these other offers that might come in. They're going to pay him like $12 million a year. Like, they're going to give him good center money.
I think we'll get something around that neighborhood.
Yeah. But yeah, they can't really let that go. But yeah, Matthews, like, I feel like Matthews is older than he is, but he's actually 32. He'll be 33 in 2025. So it's like, there's not really anything. I feel like he's older. Like, I feel like he's
Yeah, I
35.
do
It's just
too.
because he's
For some
been
reason,
here
I thought he was in
forever.
the 34,
Yeah.
35 club.
So yeah, I think he'll definitely. He's under contract through 2026 at 21 mil per, which is very. I mean, that's reasonable left tackle money. You know, who knows how long? I mean, he hasn't. Again, he's no longer, I think, in his peak years, but it's like he hasn't really like fallen off at all. So, I mean, if they need money, they could extend him and extend McGarry and possibly get another 20 million in space there, and keep the band together. But I am curious, like, if they sort of let Matthews run his course and extend, McGarry instead, and then just try to find a tackle in the next 2 drafts, because probably going to be the next draft 2026, because it's probably not going to be this when they don't have any picks. But I am curious how they play that. But the offensive line, I think, is going to be their biggest priority. And then, yeah, I mean, like you said, we'll see who they prioritize on defense coming back. That'll kind of tell us a lot. To me, it's like, well, I'd probably bring back Mike Hughes. And yeah.
Mike Hughes.
Yep.
Cool guy. Like,
he seems nice.
Maybe James Smith-Williams. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
He was fine.
Yeah.
He was fine.
I missed, TFL a game.
Yeah. He was good for one of those.
After that, but you get one TFL a game.
Yeah. No, I'm curious what happens with Nate Landman, because I think the perception of him is like that he's this great linebacker. So I wonder if someone comes and gives him a contract, or if the Falcons put like a 7th round tender on him or something. Or like original round tender, which of course is nothing. So, I am curious there, but yeah,
because they can't remake all these rooms. You go, there's going to be people back that we probably are like, we wish you could have upgraded from that. But it's going to be really interesting, and I think that linebacker room specifically is going to be fascinating, especially with that being Ulbrich's background. What does he think of what they've got? Is it as big of an issue as like we believe and from what we saw? I mean, I think it's definitely a big issue, but we'll have to see what the new coach thinks. And like you said, it'll all those things will help give us some direction as to what they're doing. And like Mike Hughes, he's somebody I was thinking about where it's like, if you were to tell me that they're going to be running a lot of zone and stuff again, I'm like, definitely bring him back. If they don't bring him back, and I'm not saying it's a pure indicator of this, but it could tell you like, okay, maybe there is going to be a shift to like wanting guys that can be more balanced, play zone and man, instead of just like being a really good outside zone corner, because like man is what Hughes has struggled with. So like it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how some of these moves play out. Yeah.
I do think like if they're going to live in nickel, they have to get a big upgrade in the slot. I'm sure they know this. So, that could easily be like the 1st round pick, like especially, like Jahdae Barron. I mean, like I was joking about that like months ago, but like it's not a joke anymore. Like it's very serious. Like them getting Jahdae Barron with their 1st round pick, like is definitely on the table. I think like also like if they trade down to like 20, that's like perfect Jahdae Barron territory. And there's a ton of edge rushers in this draft too. So I do think, the trade down probably has to happen. You traded that pick for Matt Judon, and that kind of locked you into needing to trade down in this draft. Or trading Kyle Pitts, which we could maybe end on that. That's the hot button topic right now.
Here's my trade Kyle Pitts. If we're gonna
hold on, let me get my scroll
Pitts,
out. Okay.
if we're gonna trade Kyle Pitts, this has to be an exchange of lemons. And there's only one other player I can think of with a fan base that seems to be like fed up with like a very talented player who they think is lazy at times and maybe doesn't run his routes the best way and stuff like that. Because if you're gonna trade Kyle Pitts, you're gonna get some Kyle Pitts back in the trade, and that's DK Metcalf. This is my pitch for the Atlanta Falcons to trade Kyle Pitts for DK Metcalf. I just want everybody to close their eyes right now and picture Michael Penix throwing a deep ball to DK Metcalf. That's right. Touchdown, 80 yards. Wow. You finally get somebody that can stretch the field as a true outside receiver vertically. You let Mooney play inside out, move him everywhere you want. London gets to be the big power slot guy, take care of everything, move the chains. And you go out and you trade Tyler Algier for Michael Mayer of the Las Vegas Raiders. That's right. You did not see the Tyler Algier trade for a true inline wide tight end. And that's how you fix like the only issues with the Atlanta Falcons without having to spend a single pick. All you had to do was trade a couple of players. Well, that's just my pitch.
I haven't heard that one. I that is very interesting. You know, they'll need to make some space for Metcalf, but yeah, I mean,
they're murdering me about the Tyler Algier trade. At first, they were like, "Okay, Pitts, Metcalf, that."
Okay, I'm into
Tyler
it.
Algier, it's over. I lost them, but I'm telling you, a wide tight end is what this team really needs next year because we can't do. I love Warner, but the guy can't catch the ball. He's not a receiver.
He's a passable receiver at best. He's
athletically
not
Smith.
Yes. Limited. There's a box on every scouting report that says "can scoot?" ? And that we can't check that box for him, unfortunately. There's a lack of scooting ability, unfortunately. And some guys can scoot and some guys can't. Michael Penix can scoot. We saw that, might have surprised some people. You check the can scoot box for Mike Penix, but Charlie Werner can't check that box, but cannot scoot. Yep. But yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. I do think there's gonna be some surprises. I don't know that a Pitts trade is gonna go down. But I kind of doubt it.
I don't know. I think NFL Rooms, very reliable source, saying something about the Bengals or whatever, and I'm like, sure, yeah, the Bengals can't pay T. Higgins, so just trade for Kyle Pitts because that's how that works. Like,
yeah, that'll work totally. But the thing is, like with Pitts, it all depends on the offer because the Falcons won't. I mean, people are like saying they're gonna trade Pitts for a day 3 pick. They're not even gonna pick up the phone for less than a third rounder. Like they won't even answer the call. Like and teams will know this. Like no one's gonna bother offering a day 3 pick for Kyle Pitts. Like they're gonna ask for a second, I would imagine, or a third and like a fourth. I think that's probably the minimum price for Kyle Pitts. They got a second for Hayden Hurst. Like Hayden Hurst got a second round pick. He was older than Kyle Pitts and had no production to his name his entire career, and he got a second round pick. So Kyle Pitts, I wouldn't be shocked if they end up moving him for like more than a second if some kind of bidding war develops, but like they're not going to pick up the phone for less than that, guys. Like anyone that I get Falcons fans hate Pitts with like a passion, which I've always found a little weird, like how much people hate him. It's not his fault Fontenot drafted him over Jamar Chase. I mean, that was Fontenot's fault, but they won't pick up the phone. So if no one's offering, they're not going to trade him. Like they're not just going to ship him out because you don't like him,
Yeah. And like, look, man, end of the day, when the season was on the line, when the Falcons' playoff hopes were fading away, Kyle Pitts is the one that like put the stamp on it to keep it going. Obviously, they did not win that game against the Commanders, but you cannot ignore the fact that Kyle Pitts came through in the clutch, something that people have been begging for. I think it's been really funny that so many people go back and talk about that play and they won't say a word about Kyle Pitts.
Penix is the truth.
The highlight of it, and they were like, and they said at the end of it, they said, "Can't wait to see these kinds of passes between Penix and London." It's like, but that's Pitts out there.
What? Yeah, they just forgot it. They wiped it from their memory bank. But
no,
like, and that's exactly like the thing. Like Kyle Pitts has sky high potential. Like the tight end coach is leaving. They need to get a tight end coach in here that can teach these guys to run routes. Like Kyle Pitts can run routes, but he doesn't run them great. Like you need I think this might be a coaching thing. None of the Falcons tight ends have run great routes. I mean, Jonnu Smith,
I wasn't really like blown away with the route running overall this year.
Well,
there were a couple times like Like that Commanders game, there's a throw on the sideline that people thought Penix should have made to London. London runs himself out of bounds, like just kind of all on his own. He can't touch the ball after that. There's just been little things like that. I agree with you. I think that's one of the things that they can do, like from a coaching standpoint, to kind of clean things up this year. If you're looking at like things for the offense, it's definitely the crispness of the route running.
Yeah, and like to be fair, like when you're installing a new offense, the route running, you can't spend as much time perfecting the routes when you're trying to install the plays. Like, I mean, it's like you kind of just need these guys to do it. And like they were doing it. I mean, it wasn't like guys were making mistakes constantly, but the route running in general was not very good. So I mean, I don't know if it's the tight end coach, I don't know if it's the receivers coach. It's probably both. Obviously, the tight ends coach is moving on, so maybe in this new tight ends coach, you emphasize we need someone to teach Kyle Pitts to run clean routes, like, because I think a lot of what people perceive as laziness is just the routes aren't super clean, like, and I don't know if that's a laziness thing. It might just be that, look, he's huge, he has unique movement abilities and a unique body type, and like he might need to have different, like he might need to have different footwork, or he might need to run routes a little bit differently than a traditional tight end because of how long his strides are, because of his change of direction. You know, he can change direction well, but it's just a different frame.
It's different for his body. Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to ask him to run Ray McLeod routes. Like, you're not going to ask him to even run Drake London routes. They're not, like, even London, like, Kyle Pitts has very long legs. And I think that is kind of an underrated thing of like guys that are high-waisted versus low-waisted. Guys that have low waist tend to have lower top speed, but they are a little bit crisper with their movements. Guys with the longer legs tend to have better long speed, but they take longer or more steps to do these movements. So they need, like, this is
when you saw
like
Kyle vertical, when you saw him get to stretch those legs, that's when
he's
had
best.
the most success. So
yes, I mean, it's not a surprise, but like you just have to, like, it's like, it still blows my mind that they drafted this guy and then kind of just like refused to craft something for him. Like, you went out and got one of the most unique players in the NFL, and you just like refuse to craft something for him. And people are like, oh, well, if he's that good, you shouldn't have to have something crafted for him. Why wouldn't you like take time? Yes, like why wouldn't you craft something for your special player? Like, what else are you doing? Like I don't. It's just, yes, like it would be nice if he could do these simple tight end routes as well as these other tight ends. Like, it would be nice if he was better on slants and stuff like that. And he can get better there, but like, you need a coach that's like, maybe you have to adjust these routes a little bit. Maybe you need to call a different route tree for him, or just treat him like a big slot. You know, he had a lot of success doing that this year. And like, I will give props to the tight end coach. I think his blocking got better. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it went from like liability to passable, which is like, that's really all you need from Kyle Pitts. Like, asking him to be better than that without carrying 250 plus is asking a lot. But you know, I think people, it
was easily his best season since his rookie year, and I do think that's kind of getting lost on people. Like, I do think people are like treating it as like this is just 3 years of decline, and it's like, whoa, this was like far and away a better season than the last two.
Oh yeah.
It is just, you know, I know it feels like we're making excuses and things like that. I think one of the biggest things is obviously the quarterback situation. I think his confidence got wrecked having to, like, one, Mariota's why his knee got blown up. Two, he didn't feel any different when Ritter was throwing those balls over the middle, and he was having to also still work back from the knee injury and stuff. This was the first year where it looked like things had finally kind of gotten back on track physically, and that they were building towards something. The quarterback situation, I think, is the other piece of the route running puzzle that we've been talking about. Is how does your quarterback like you to run those routes? What is your relationship with him, the chemistry, all that? And hopefully those are the things that we see, like, with whoever's here now next year, if it's Kyle and everybody or just London, whatnot. That's going to be the next evolution of this offense, is that level of comfort, guys understanding the intricacies of how the other one thinks and where they want them to be, and all that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, I'm fascinated to see, but like, I think people see the numbers for Kyle Pitts and they like compare him to Drake London or something like that. And that's not a compare. Like, Drake London's a number one wide receiver.
Number one option. Yeah.
Kyle Pitts is a number one tight end. Kyle Pitts is squarely in the range of a number one tight end. Like, people were like, just the hyperbole with Pitts is the issue. Like, people are like, oh, he was worthless. He was not a part of the offense. Like, he had the fourth most receiving yards on the team, which is disappointing.
Yeah.
But he had 80 less yards than Ray McLeod on like 20 less catches. Like, I mean,
and again, he was not getting force fed the ball. Like,
Yeah.
there were games where they wouldn't even look at him. So, like, I'm with you. I'm like, he was the fourth option. He finished with the fourth most yards on the team. That checks out. Like, like, what do you want him to do?
Right. And I constantly see people like, oh, they like maybe they should upgrade Ray McLeod. It's like, yeah, they should upgrade Ray McLeod by putting Kyle Pitts out there. They should upgrade Ray McLeod by just having Kyle Pitts out there. That's my take. You know, there you go, 2 for 1. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they do. I do think obviously Penix with the vertical passing game is just a much better fit for Kyle Pitts. So I do wonder if like we're just going to see, like, if they keep Kyle Pitts, that we'll just see Pitts run like a vertical route tree. Like, they're just like, we're going to stop pretending that you're a shallow cross, quick out, like slant tight end, like Charlie Warner or like any other wide tight end. We're just going to have you run posts and digs and goes like all day. And just, you'll get 3 targets a game deep. And if you catch one, then it's probably a house call. So, like, great, and it's like, maybe that's just who he is. He's just a vertical threat. But if he can be a really good vertical threat, there you go. I mean, we know Mike Penix can get him the ball.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that. So that's a fascinating one too. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of the big off-season questions, and obviously we have many months of continued discussion, but I hope you guys got your little taste, little appetizer here of some of these big questions and some of the more fascinating discussions, I think. But yeah, anything else you want to cover today, Tre'Shon, before we sign off?
No, nothing else today. Really looking forward to all of the coverage we have coming up. Gonna be putting in a lot of good work and stuff like that. So just excited for the off season at this point.
Yeah. Yes, the off season. Hope springs eternal. This team doesn't, this team only lets us down during free agency and during the draft. The rest of the time, it's not like every week disappointment. It's like maybe there's a couple times where we get disappointed. It's much better than during the season in some ways. But yeah, as Tre'Shon hinted, lots of stuff coming this week. Tre'Shon will be at the Shrine Bowl, and we will have a Shrine and Senior Bowl show coming out later this week, talking about some of those guys to keep an eye on. Marquise Williams, notably going to be at the Shrine Bowl, which is awesome. And then, of course, we will both be at the Senior Bowl next week. We'll have a number of shows for you guys, recapping practice and discussing everything going on there. I know several people have already donated to the Senior Bowl Fund. Thank you guys so much for that. You can continue to do that. Just make sure you leave your question when you do it, if you do it offline, so we can get to that on the next show. Yeah. Like, subscribe. We really appreciate that. If you guys got takes on what we discussed, Kyle Pitts, Kirk Cousins, the rest of these off-season discussions, leave those in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. We will be back on Wednesday. I'm not going to say his name because every time I've said his name, something comes up and it doesn't happen. But we should have a Falcons legend on Wednesday's show joining us for that. And if you guys paid attention, earlier this year, it's the same person. We just, some scheduling conflicts. But should be Wednesday night for that. Obviously, we'll continue talking about this hire as well, and we'll go from there. But yeah, thanks again to Tre'Shon Diaz for joining us. He's at Trey3Sean on the Twitters. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Thanks again for joining us on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Thanks again to BetOnline and Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the show. We will see you guys next time on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, Falcoholic Live. Have a great day, folks. Thanks.